Ooh, one is waiting. It might be me. Someone's waiting, Dad.
Hello, SmallBizReorg. And we are live. Welcome to SmallBizReorg's first live stream. Today we are going to go over a bunch of different things, and hopefully you're going to actually find it enjoyable. And maybe you'll actually get something out of it and pick up some stuff. Actually, you're going to get a lot of stuff. You're going to get some free stuff. And everybody likes free stuff. So that's going to be coming up later. But first, we're going to go over some other things, like what to do with property owners that get into some problems. Because yesterday, the Wall Street Journal announced that defaulted loans on offices have hit a record high. So there we go. So what do you do with it? If you're sitting there and you own property and you have one of those defaulted loans. Also going to talk a little bit about cash flow, and we're going to talk about some other issues like money. Everybody likes money. Yeah, so that brings up an issue. Money, is that a new issue? Who knows? So let's think about it. Because, well, you know, I'm sorry, I can't avoid it. Money and music. Here we go. The Beatles. Can't buy me love. Well, actually, you can buy love. And in at least one state in the United States, it's legal. And in several other countries, it's legal too. So why are they saying you can't buy love? Of course you can buy love. Well, maybe not love, but, well, you know what I mean. Anyway, so let's look at the lyrics a little bit. You can't buy me love, but you can buy a diamond ring and it'll make you feel all right. Because I don't care too much for money. But let's think about it. The people who write this song, they had more money than God. So I guess they knew about it. But they went on and said, money can't buy me love. I'll give you all I've got if you say you love me too. So they're going to go out there and say, money can't buy you love, but they're going to give it away to buy that love. Anyway, it's something to think about. So let's go on to the next song about money, because there's lots of them. And this one's great. Money, Money, Money by ABBA. And it's really fun, okay? I work all night. I work all day to pay the bills I have to pay. Ain't it sad? And still, there never seems to be a single penny left for me. But it's great, because money, money, money must be funny in the rich man's world. And they go on, and they're real honest about it. It's always sunny in the rich man's world. So it's fun, and they just keep going. But here's the one you gotta love. Pink Floyd and Money. Money, get away. You get a good job with more pay, and you're okay. Money, it's a gas. Grab that cash with both hands and make a stash. New car, caviar, 4-star daydream. Think I'll buy me a football team. Money, get back. I'm all right, Jack. Keep your hands off my stack. Money, it's a hit. Wow. So we went from the Beatles telling you can't buy me love with money to ABBA just having a good time with money to Pink Floyd. Well, you get the picture. So lots of music here about money. And now we're going to go to one that's really kind of a sad story, but shows you how it's changed over time. We're going to go back to the era when things were different. We're going to go back to the old Bing Crosby. And brother, can you spare a dime? And they used to tell me I was building a dream, and so I followed the mob. When there was earth to plow or guns to bear, I was always there right on the job. They used to tell me I was building a dream with peace and glory ahead. Why should I be standing in line just waiting for bread? Once I built a railroad, I made it run, made it race against time. Once I built a railroad, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime? Obviously, talking about one of the darkest eras in American history. So, everybody's looking for money. Everybody wants money. Everybody talks about money. But actually, we don't, do we? We look at social media and everybody looks at how great life is. But nobody really talks about money. Nobody talks about money problems. Well, I guess we do. But we're one of the few places that does. Because if you have money problems or money problems come up, nobody talks about it in a cocktail party. But here we are. So what do you do? What happens? What are the answers? Go listen to some songs and joke about it and have a good time. But what are you really doing? Where do you get the answers? So we told you we're going to give away some free stuff and show you where to get it, and get manuals on the Small Business Reorganization Act, which, by the way, there's a bill to extend its limit, but as of right now, June 21st, it's going to drop from 7.5 million back down to 2.1. But right now, what we're going to talk about is a different topic. Let's say that you own a building. Let's say that you have a tenant, and we generally talk about commercial properties. Let's say it's a restaurant, and they're falling behind on their rent, and you're trying to figure out what to do. What are your choices? Well, you could walk in and tell them, pay the whole rent or get out. It's the end of the road, that this is it. And, maybe that's the answer. And you could look at them and say, I've done everything I can for you. You could renegotiate and maybe give them a short-term break and say they got to make it up. And you could have a conversation. You could do nothing and just let them sit there for a while and decide what you're going to do. You should probably get a professional in the area, get a lawyer, somebody in the turnaround area to work with you, to help you figure out what to do. Has that tenant come to you to talk about what the problem is? Are they paying the rent? Have they stopped paying the rent? Where's your property located? Is it a property where you're getting offers for the space? Are you able to pay your mortgage? Do you have other vacancies in the building? These are all questions you want to ask, because deciding what to do when you have a loan when you have a building with a tenant that's having trouble comes down to a lot of different questions. And it's a lot of analysis that goes into this. For those of you who looked at my background, I've been doing this for a long time now. This is my 4th decade. And I've practiced law, and I've owned properties. I've run businesses. And those answers don't come easy. And they're not an answer that you take out a book and pick up and come to by reading one chapter or one book or just looking at it. They're answers you get to by doing the analysis and by talking to the people and by meeting the people. And sometimes you have to judge who that person is. Are they being honest with you? Can you trust them? Or are they feeding you a line? And then you have to decide, is this business going to be around for the long term? Can you get another tenant? The next question that comes up is, do you have a mortgage on the property? Are you paying your mortgage? It may not be your choice. If you're not paying the mortgage, you may be in discussions with your lender about what to do. Maybe you're one of those people who owns a building that has a loan that's in default. Let's talk about that a little bit. We know that there are a record number of commercial properties that have loans that are in default. Who do you talk to about that? Where do you go to get help for that? Well, we're going to take a minute and we're going to jump over and bring up this, or actually, I'm not sure if I can bring up the screen that I like to, but there's a bunch of places where you can go and look to get help for that. And there's directories where you can find professionals who can help you find the answers to that. The Commercial Law League of America has directories on their site. The American Bankruptcy Institute has directories of professionals on their site. Turnaround Management Association has directories on their site. These are professionals that focus their practices in these areas. And the advantage is this is what they do. They have experience. So if you're facing this for the first time or maybe the second time, it really helps when you have somebody who this is what they do. So what are your choices? What are your decisions? Well, in the current market, a lot of different things are happening. We're seeing a record number of properties just get handed back to lenders. So one of the decisions you're going to have to make is, do you hand the property back to a lender? And by the way, for those of you who are watching, there is a chat that's open, and if you have questions or you have comments, feel free to type into the chat and just throw any questions right in there. I'll be happy to address them. But maybe that's an answer, especially if the property is one that no longer has any equity in it. But making that determination, how do you know if the property doesn't have any equity left in it? How do you make that determination? How do you get there? That's a hard thing to figure out. And if you've owned the property, especially if it's something that's been in your family for a long time, or if you've had it for a long time, making a determination as to whether or not there's equity left in the property may not be that easy. And that's where you need somebody who doesn't have an emotional tie to the property to get involved. And that's where you really need to step up and look at somebody from either the professional side on the business side or a lawyer who has experience in this area to come in and join you, really as an advisor, a partner on this, not in the sense of a money partner, but a partner to help you figure out what to do next. Because without that, this is going to be a really hard road to hoe. So think about that. They also have the ability to go in and talk to the bank and have a discussion that you're probably going to have trouble with. What's the leading issue when you're in that position? Getting help too late. Most people don't call for help early enough. The other thing that most people do is when they talk to their lender, they tend to be, shall we say, overly optimistic with their projections. They tend to overpromise. They tend to tell their lender things are going to be better. Going back to the musical theme, blue skies are going to clear up, or gray skies are going to clear up. Put on a happy face. And the lender expects that. You tell the lender you're going to make the payments next week, tomorrow, next month, in 3 months. The lender believes you, and the lender expects to see the payments. And when that doesn't happen, you have a problem and you lose credibility. Bringing in a professional, letting that professional step up and walk into the conversation and take over gives you a second bite at the apple. And that can be the difference between saving your property, or in the case of a business, which is what we're going to talk about next, saving your business and losing it. So, something to think about. And I know I probably sound like a broken record because I talk about it all the time, but bringing professionals into these situations makes all the difference in the world. So we'll move on from that right now. So looking at that, little page flip here. Cash flows. What are they and what aren't they? And this is a tough one. A lot of people confuse cash flow with top line revenue. Top line revenue, the money coming in the door, is not cash flow. That's right. Businesses that make $5 million often are not profitable. Probably a lot of people watching this don't remember Crazy Eddie. Crazy Eddie Anton was famous. You can look at it on YouTube for those of you who aren't old enough. Great commercials. He was insane. That was his whole motto. And he was giving it all away. And it turns out he actually was giving it all away because what he had was great revenue. He brought in lots of money, mainly because he was selling things for prices he shouldn't have been selling them for because he was looking for a way to go public and it was a scam. And he eventually went to jail for securities fraud. But Crazy Eddie knew how to generate great revenue to bring his numbers up. And the YouTube video is fascinating as to exactly what he did. And he was a scam probably in the 1970s or 1980s, long before computers. But it shows the difference between revenue and good, strong corporate cash flow. Because cash flow is like a river. You can have lots of it at the top, but what gets down to the bottom? And I guess the best example is what just happened out in the West, where we saw the Colorado River might have had water coming down from the mountains at the top, but by the time everybody got done drawing the water out for crops, none of it was getting down to Lake Mead. And the level of the lake kept on going down, lower and lower and lower. And as that water level dropped, we found ourselves in a situation that was unsustainable. So what does that mean? Well, if you have cash coming in and you're building inventory or you're paying employees, even if it's to build the business, but there's not enough that gets to the bottom to give you at least some profit or enough profit for you to live, you don't have good cash flow. So what can you do about that? Well, in the short term and with older businesses, there's a couple of tricks you can use. And we see this all the time. We're working with companies. One of them is to look for old, new inventory. What do I mean by that? Often when you have a company that's been around for a long time, you can walk in and you will find shelves stocked with inventory. And you'll talk to the owners and you'll find out this inventory has been there for years. And often I'm talking 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And it's actually pretty good stuff. And the owners will tell you how much it cost. And you'll ask them why they have it. And they'll say somebody's going to come in and buy it. And they're going to pay 3 times, 5 times, 10 times what they paid for it when they bought it. And they're holding it on the shelf. And it's taking up a lot of space. Meanwhile, the company's dying because it doesn't have enough money coming in. And what's the company doing? It's building and manufacturing more product to put into inventory. Why? Because eventually they're going to sell all this new material that they're making that's going into inventory. So what's the answer? The answer is start selling the old inventory and get it off the shelf. Even if you sell it for less than they paid for it, Now, I know there's probably some accountants that are watching, and the accountants are sitting there and they're grimacing and they're looking right now at me and saying, "You're selling at a loss." I know, I am. But this isn't about profit and loss. This is about cash flow. And when we talk about distressed companies, we talk about 13-week budgets. And those 13-week budgets are all about cash, and they're about keeping the company alive. And they're about getting cash in the door and getting cash to meet payroll, to pay the rent, to keep the electric on, to pay the insurance bills. They're about paying the essentials. And quite frankly, that inventory that's been sitting on the shelf for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, maybe 10 years has been costing the company because they've been paying rent for the space. It's been sitting there, and if they have debt, it's been costing them interest. And nobody is focused on exactly how expensive it's been to keep that inventory in place. And now it's time to do something with the inventory. It's time to monetize it. It's also time for the company to rationalize what type of inventory it holds on its books. So you move the old inventory out, you sell it for whatever you can get, and you take the cash and you put it back into the business. And you also try to rationalize what type of product you're going to either purchase or manufacture and hold in inventory, because that's how you build a strong business. Looking at the manufacturing companies, you also get into what's the labor force like? If all they're doing is building more product to put up into inventory, you have an issue. You have a big issue because they're building more inventory to put right back on that shelf that was filled. But they weren't selling enough to empty the shelves. They were treading water. So here we go again. We have a company that was having trouble, that's in trouble because they're carrying too much inventory. On paper, they look pretty good because their assets are lots of inventory. And in the future, if you listen to the owners, they're going to sell that inventory for 3 times, 4 times, 5 times what the book value says it is. But in reality, they're cash poor. And why do they look so good? Because they keep manufacturing more inventory to put up on the shelf. So you got to turn that company in a different direction. One of the things you usually have to do is get somebody in there who helps them figure out what product they really sell. Sometimes the product they sell really isn't that profitable. And maybe it's a company that doesn't belong in business anymore. Or maybe it's a company that has a really profitable product and they just don't realize it. One way or another, you have to get to the bottom of it and figure out what's going on. But first, you have to get them so that they stay alive. And that's where liquidating that old new inventory is so critical, because that's the lifeline. Anyway, that's a little bit about kind of how you can do it with some companies. And that's a lucky one when they have that type of situation. But what do you do when you walk in and the company really has cash problems? And they don't have old new inventory and they just have cash problems. That's a lot harder, because those are the situations where you have to start cutting. And oftentimes, the largest expense of companies is labor, and nobody wants to cut people. And you start looking to see where you can cut. And the number one place to cut, and everybody hates this, and every accountant knows it, and every lawyer who does this knows it, is SG&A. That's right, my friends. Sales, general, and accounting, and administrative. So you go to the SG&A line and you look at what's there: the office staff, the people up top. It also tends to get bloated over time And if you look across any industry, you'll find that there's a norm. And if you go into most troubled companies, you'll find that they're way above that. Because if there's any place to bury the cost, it's going right to the SG&A. The other place that you usually find in companies is something called miscellaneous. And almost every company I've ever worked on this side is the miscellaneous line. I'm going to get to the people who lend money in a minute because I've done as much work on the creditor side as I have on the borrower side. But the miscellaneous line is my favorite line. That and the extraordinary expense line, which, by the way, is a fascinating line as to what people consider extraordinary expenses. But miscellaneous can contain just about anything, from a doghouse to, well, I won't go into some of the other things. However, people use miscellaneous to put down all kinds of expenses and become very, very creative in their accounting. So miscellaneous is another line to look at to make cuts and to really bring the accounting back under control. But these tend to be the two places you look at first and where you can make cuts. But unfortunately, it's usually the labor force. You also tend to find that there's often ways to automate equipment and to cut down on the head. So long-term capital investment tends to be neglected, and there's ways to update the systems and get the equipment running a lot better and a lot more efficiently. So those are where you tend to see it on that side. When you're on the lender side, it's a lot harder decision, depending on what level you're at. Senior lender. Senior lender has it a little bit easier. If you are the senior lender and there's a junior lender, well, your choice just got a lot easier. Because that junior lender's got the hard part. As long as the collateral that you have made your loan against is strong enough for you to get paid, you pretty much can ride it out for a little while, but you're probably going to make a decision and say, you know what, I'm just going to foreclose. I want my money, and I can start an action to collect. Now, the group that's got the hardest decision is the junior lender. Because if you foreclose and you just go in there and go to take your assets, the junior lender has a choice. They can let you foreclose and sell the assets and take your money, and whatever is left over goes to them. Or they can buy you out and try to save their loan. So they end up with a really hard choice. And maybe you think you're going to end up a little short, but you're probably going to end up pretty good, or at least you're going to end up the best of anybody in the deal. So that's what happens when you're the senior lender, depending on what it is. Or maybe you think the company's strong enough and you're going to just keep getting paid. But you assume you're usually in a pretty good place. And assuming your documents are done well and you have some type of intercreditor agreement, you can really control the process. So assuming you're a senior lender, you're in pretty good shape. Unless you have an office building that's 70% empty and the lender walks in and it's a non-recourse loan. And the borrower walks in and the borrower says to you, here's the keys. Good luck. Now you have an empty office building and you just got the keys to it. And you have the same problem that your borrower had. You have a 70% empty office building and you have to fill it. That one is a little bit harder. And, well, that's just a market condition problem. You're going to have to hire a good broker, tenant improvements, or sell the building at a loss to somebody. The market seems to be getting a little bit better, but it's a market condition problem. So we'll do another video on that. But for an operating company, if the company looks pretty good, you got a few choices. Ride it out with the current management, foreclose, sell it off, and take your money out. Let's go down to that junior lender. There, it's a little bit more of a chess game. So what can the junior lender do? The junior lender often is not allowed to do anything, and the senior lender holds all the cards. But the junior lender can do one thing, or the mezz lender, depending on the structure of the debt. The mezz lender can buy out the senior lender and pay off the senior lender and basically take over the senior lender's position and step into the shoes of the senior lender. And in the event of foreclosure, that may be their only choice to protect their position. May not be a great option, but it may be the only good option to protect the position. Or they can let the investment go. The other options are to start litigation, install it, but that's often a temporary solution. Sometimes it works a little better than others, but you've got to see what it is. You also have to see how much equity is in the property. And again, all of this comes down to how much equity is in the asset, whether it's an operating company or if it's a property. So you're looking at what are your choices? What are your options? How do you treat this? What do you do? There's a lot that goes into these decisions and a lot that goes on. What's the borrower doing in all of this? It depends on what their position is. How much equity is in the business? How much equity is in the property? What are their rights under the agreements? In all of these situations, what are the relative parties' rights under the agreements? This is why you need counsel, and you need good counsel to evaluate the documents. It takes time. It costs money. But without that analysis, you are handicapped. There is no question about it. So with that, you look at it and understand where you are. And without that analysis, you're a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat. And that is a tough place to be. So that's kind of that position. So where does that take us? I guess that takes us to where we are right now and things to look at. I was hoping we'd actually have some questions by now, but I see we don't. So the live chat portion of this is not going very well. So the 30 minutes of prepared material is now completed. So I think we may end a little earlier than I planned, given no questions. That said, I want to thank everybody who attended. We will have another one of these, and I'll probably prepare 1 hour of material, given that there are no questions in the live chat section. So thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you next time.